So today we're going to look at frame rate conversion within Final Cut 10. The idea for this tutorial was inspired by a good friend of mine by the name of Joe Castano, who sent me an email and asked me the following question. In a 2997 project, how do I add clips shot at 2398 to speed up the action? I don't want Final Cut to add frames to make it 2997. In short, Joe wants to put a piece of footage into a timeline and have it play back at its native frame rate, the frame rate that it was acquired in. He also adds, conversely, how do I add clips shot at 2398 to a 2997 project and have them play back smoothly at 2997? So how do I put a clip into, how do I do a frame rate conversion to the project frame rate? So we're going to go through this and we'll start with the first question, which is putting a 2398 piece of footage into a 2997 project and getting it to play back at 2398. So here we are in Final Cut 10, and I've got one piece of footage here, and this footage, if we look at the inspector, we can see that it is 2398 frames per second. So the first thing we need to do is create a project. Let's go to File, New Project, and we're going to call this 29-97 so we don't get confused. If you're set based on first video clip, you need to click on Custom because we want to make sure that this project is a 2997 project. 1920, 1080, 2997, hit OK. Now what we'll do is grab a piece of this footage where there's some motion. There's a nice little pan from left to right. Mark that out, append it into the timeline, and then we'll zoom in on the timeline. Now, Final Cut 10, by default, is going to try and take your footage and conform it to the frame rate of the project. So 2398 footage into a 2997, it's going to conform it to 2997. And if we hit playback, we'll see that it's a little bit stuttery. Actually, let me go full screen so you can get a better idea of this. So the footage is a bit stuttery, and I'm going to show you how to fix that in just a minute. But right now, what we want to do is show how to get this footage to play back in its native 2398, the frame rate that it was acquired in this 2997 timeline. And it's fairly simple to do that. You've got a drop-down menu over here, the retime menu, and all you're going to do is select automatic speed. And you can see in the timeline that it retimed the footage. It's now faster. It's going to play at 125% so that it can play its 24 frames back in a 2997 timeline. And basically what that does is speeds up the footage. And as we can see here as it loop plays, it plays back a lot smoother. We don't have the jumpiness that we had while it was trying to conform it to 2997, but it is playing back faster at 125%. So that's how you get it to play back at its native frame rate within the timeline. So the other part of the question, how do we get it to conform to the frame rate of the timeline but play back smoothly? Let's remove this from the timeline and we'll drop it back in. We'll drop that same clip back in. And again, just to review, if we look at it being conformed by default by Final Cut 10, you can see that it's jumpy. So how do we fix that? Well, we have to tell Final Cut what algorithm it's going to use to do this frame rate conform. Let's select the clip. We'll go up to the video tab, scroll down, and there's a section in here called Rate Conform. And this is where you can decide how Final Cut 10 is going to conform your 2398 to a 2997 timeline. The default is floor, and once again, we'll show you that. You can see it's quite jumpy, because basically Final Cut is adding frames here to stretch it out to a 2997. The next choice that you have is nearest neighbor. I've not had much luck with nearest neighbor. It's kind of the same as floor. You still have those jumpy frames here, so it's kind of choppy. The next selection that you're going to have is frame blending, and frame blending does that. It kind of blends one frame into the other. It usually has a bit of a weird effect, especially on vertical lines. If you look at the vertical lines on these trees, look at the vertical lines on the windows, you can see that there's kind of a blurry effect here, so that's not going to work for us either. So the last choice that you have in Rate Conform is Optical Flow. Now, Optical Flow is going to wind up being the smoothest way of doing this. However, it's going to take a little bit more time. Final Cut's going to go in, it's going to analyze the footage. After it does its analysis of the footage, it's going to create those extra frames to stretch it out. So let's select Optical Flow. You can see right now that it's analyzing for Optical Flow. Once the analysis is done, we're going to do a quick render. Render the timeline out real quick. And now here it is with Optical Flow. Much smoother. We don't have all those jumpy frames. We don't have the blur effect of frame blending. Yeah, this is the Optical Flow is basically the make it look good juice. So that's how you conform to the frame rate of the project and have it look nice and smooth.